the amount of rainfall you get on the Big Island can vary dramatically depending on where you live, and that's something you definitely want to consider before buying a property. We'll talk about all that up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? Nonaka here at the Buy Big Island video blog, and I often get asked, how much rainfall does the Big Island get when people are considering moving here? And that's an important consideration, and it's always a complicated answer because it really depends on where you live on the island and really at what elevation you live, because that makes a very big difference. And to a lot of people on the island who live on catchment for their water supply, that is an important consideration, because if you don't have sufficient rainfall, you'd have to truck water in. So that's a separate discussion in terms of catchment, but it's a big consideration if you're going to be on catchment, depending on where you decide to buy based on how much rainfall you get. So I'm going to go through real quickly around the whole island and explain the different areas and the different levels of rainfall, because they do vary pretty dramatically depending on where you live, and even between a few miles depending on elevation. So if we start over in Kona, over here on the west side, and I guess we should start with the weather patterns in Hawaii. So in Hawaii, the weather patterns, the trade winds normally blow from the east to the west, right? So they're blowing towards the west, and so most of the weather that we get comes from the east, and it's moving west, and then it hits the east side of the island here, and we have two big mountains, Mauna Kea right here and Mauna Loa down here, and those mountains trap a lot of that wet weather on the east side of the island. So the east side of the island gets a lot more of the rain than the west side, because that rain doesn't necessarily make it all the way across the island after it gets trapped behind those two big mountains on the east side. So because of that, in general, the west side is drier than the east side, but that varies dramatically based upon the elevation too, because as you get higher in elevation, there's more rainfall, and then as you get really high, there becomes less rainfall. So there's a belt of like 1,000 to 2,000 feet that get significantly more rainfall than higher and lower elevations. So if we start on the west side over in Kailua, if you're living down by the water in Kailua, towards the ocean level elevation, you're going to be getting like 30 to 35 inches of rain every year. But if you drive just 10 minutes up the hill to about 1,000 feet of elevation, you get closer to 50 inches of rain, sometimes more a year, depending on the area. So in this area up here along the upper highway, at about 1,000 to 2,000 feet, you get almost twice as much rain as you would if you were living closer to the ocean. So that's kind of in this Kona west side area here. As you move up north towards Waikoloa village, this area is a lot drier, and it's more like a lava desert if you've been out there before. It's an old lava field, and it looks very dry. And in this whole area, this whole pocket of area right here, they get about 10 to 15 inches of rain a year, so a lot less than Kona does, even down by the water. So as you move north, it gets drier in this area, and then you go all the way north to Kohala, and you get back up to 35 to 50 inches of rain a year, depending on if you're living by the water or higher up in the Kohala Mountains up in this area. And as you go towards Waimea, which is kind of thought of as the central area of the island, you get about 65 inches of rain a year. So give or take, it gets a lot wetter, and this is where a lot of the weather comes through as it's coming from the east side. You're between Mauna Kea and the Kohala Mountains, and so there's a saddle here that goes through, and they do get a little bit more rain. It's a much higher elevation, like 3,000-4,000 feet, so they get a little bit more rain there. And then as we move around the island to the Honokaa area, this is the Hamakua coast, old sugarcane country all along the way down to Hilo. That whole entire coast gets a lot more rain because, again, the rain is coming from the east side and moving over. And so they get about 100 inches of rain a year all the way down by the coastline, and up to 200 inches a year as you move up at a higher elevation. So again, geographically, it doesn't look that different. I mean, the coastline, you get 100 inches of rain a year along the coastline, but if you just go up along the upper highway along this area at 1,000 to 2,000 feet, you can be getting 200 inches of rain a year. So a lot more. And then as we move further south to Hilo on the east side of the island, that's where you're going to see the highest level of rainfall over on that side, and as we move down to Pāhoa. So in Hilo, down by the sea level, you're going to be getting about 140 inches of rain a year. And as you move up the hill a little ways, not very far geographically, but up into some elevation, you can get up to 220 inches of rain a year. So the rain almost doubles as you move away from the ocean. into the higher elevations in Hilo. And then as you move south to the Pāhoa area, this Puna district down here, same thing. It's about 100 to 140 inches of rain a year. The elevation doesn't get real high in this area, so that's why you don't get that 200 inches of rain. As you go higher up into the Mountain View and Curtistown area up in here, you see rainfall closer to those 200 inch a year levels. And so as we move down to the south side of the island, it gets drier again, kind of similar, more similar to the west side of the island. So this whole southern district, the Ka'u district, is closer to 25 inches of rain a year. If you're closer to the water, and then 50 inches of rain a year as you get into the higher elevations. So things get more similar to the west side along the south side, and then that brings us back to Kona. So as you can see, the variations of rainfall kind of vary pretty dramatically depending on where you live, and it depends on what you prefer. If you want more lush, green, rainy areas, or if you want the desert, we got that too, and everything in between. So it's an important consideration, not only for just lifestyle and what kind of weather you like, but definitely if you're planning to farm or grow things. That's why Kona does so well with Kona coffee, is because the amount of rainfall we get is really ideal for coffee, and the coffee really like it, and that's why it grows so well, and we're famous for it here in Kona. But lots to think about. If you want any specific information on a specific area of the island that you're looking at, always feel free to reach out, Dylan@bybigisland.com, and make sure you like the video and hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Always appreciate that, and I'll see you guys next week. Aloha.